Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1974 sci-fi horror film titled The Mutations, or its original title was called The Freakmaker. Now, The Mutations runs for 1 hour and 32 minutes long. It is directed by Academy Award-winning cinematographer Jack Cardiff. This was his attempt to make the transition from cinematographer to a director, but sometimes it just goes to show you, don't take a person out of its comfort zone. Some people are meant to be a cinematographer, other people were meant to be a director, and let's just say Jack Cardiff, he was just better off as a cinematographer. We'll get more into that. It is produced by Robert D. Weinbach. The script was written by Edward Mann and Robert D. Weinbach. The movie was composed by Basil Kirchin with some uncredited credentials to Jack Nathan. Well, in my world where I live in, uncredited people to me get credit. No one is ever uncredited. The cinematography was done by Paul Beeson, and it was edited by John Trumper. And the stars of the movie are Donald Pleasence, who of course we know as he played Blofeld in the 1960s James Bond movies. And of course throughout the 70s and 80s he was also played Dr. Loomis from the Halloween movies, where he's always on the pursuit for Michael Myers. Other stars in there include Tom Baker, who would go on to play the Doctor from the Doctor Who series. He was the longest running Doctor in franchise history. He was the Doctor for 7 years on the show from 1974 to 1981. Yeah, he was in there. He quickly became the Doctor shortly after this movie. He really does go unrecognizable in this movie, which I will get to in a bit. Other stars in there include Brad Harris, Julie Edgy, Scott Antony, Jill Haworth, Michael Dunn in one of his last roles before he died a year later. I think it was due to some sort of a heart condition because of the fact that, he was a small, diminutive little guy. And I guess, unfortunately, it was due to his dwarfism, which would have been the main contributions to his death. Premature death, to be exact. Well, there's a lot of stars in this movie who are not with us anymore, including Donald Pleasence, but they went a much later. Also joining the cast includes Olga Antony, Lisa Collings, Joan Scott, Toby Lennon, John Wreford, Eithne Dunn, and Richard Davies. Whether you title it The Mutation or The Freakmaker, one thing is for sure. It put the effort in trying to stay up to par with other B-movie horror films from the 70s. But just like any other kid's sibling, they usually fail to keep up with the older ones. This movie, of course, tries to sort of pay homage to both Frankenstein, with the whole idea of a mad scientist trying to pretend to be God by trying to go against the forces of nature by using human manipulation to defy the odds, only for the odds to backfire on them. It also pays homage to the 1932 movie Freaks, because in this movie there are a lot of those people who are born with abnormalities, people who were scorned by society and feel that being with their kind, which I kind of feel a bit saddened and also at times a bit offended Even though, well, I don't want to sound condescending in any way because maybe I don't fit the bill as a freak, but I do kind of have some freakish abnormalities in me as well. Okay, maybe I do have 5 fingers on each hand and 5 toes on each foot, but no. Um, hey, want to know something? We're all freaks. We all have different physical abnormalities or is that makes us not a freak, but a unique. I mean, hey, look, I got long, skinny, thin arms, and I got fat, pudgy legs. There you go. There's the freak guy in me. But but then there are people who have more extreme physical abnormalities. Yeah, but of course they don't. They're not like adept to the societal norms. So they pretty much hide in some kind of segregated haven where they will be more accepted to society because society just wants to just throw them aside. Never mind the fact that they might have 160 IQs. Maybe they may have the cure for cancer. Maybe they may have, maybe they know the meaning of life. Maybe these guys may have a PhD in quantum mechanics. Maybe they may probably have the abilities to build a rocket to take us out of the galaxy. I know I'm sort of stretching things a bit, but it's a possibility. But because they don't fit the physical norms of society, it's like, yeah, you might probably have a PhD in quantum mechanics, but you also have hands shaped like a lobster. People are not going to look at you for your intellectual side. They're going to look at those lobster claw hands, and you're just going to be stared at. You're going to be ostracized. You're going to be judged. You're going to be ridiculed, and people are going to hate you. So, hiding out with other people who are described as freaks, well, they have to sort of hang around with their own because nobody else will give them any opportunity. Well, none of them will give them any credibility. But I remember when they said to Lynch, "We love you. You're one of us." Well, you know what I gotta say to the freaks? We love you guys too. You're one of us. Why? Because you're human beings. You belong on this earth just like everybody else. I don't care if you're I don't care if you have excess facial hairs on your face that cover up your entire face to look like Cousin A. I don't care if you have hands like lobsters. I don't care if you have an extra set of legs. I don't care if you have if you if you have the if your eyes pop out of your socket, because I'm going to tell you something. We love you. You guys are one of us. You breathe the same air as we do. You eat off the same foods as us. You think like us. You act like us. You're no different than us. So anybody out there who has these kind of abnormalities, just say to yourselves, you're one of us. That's all that matters. Part of this movie kind of feels like one big psychedelic acid trip. The other feels like an experimental, campy horror fest that is all the essential set pieces for a low budget, obscure, but entertaining popcorn horror film with some mild scares to keep us on the edge of our seats for 92 minutes. But in the end, sadly, the film falls flat on its face due to the slow pacing, the mundane acting, and the lack of anything memorable after watching it. Yes, the film may run for an hour and 32 minutes long, but it actually feels almost like a 2 hour flick. I mean, just face it. I mean, the opening scenes is basically just Professor Noulter, played by Donald Pleasence, showing, an in-class video presentation of flowers growing, and then he goes on some hyperbolic spiel about how plant life is more beneficial life than humans and animals, and how he says that we as a human beings, we're all species of mutations. And maybe he's not half wrong. Maybe we are all one big mutations. I mean, the dinosaurs were. Anything that comes in the manifestations of DNA, and anything that grows and breathes and eats are conventionally mutations. And maybe he's right. We are. We are all created through a much more natural stance. I mean, people can say that we were all descendants of God, but of course, since he is a scientist, he's gonna more lean towards the scientific side rather than the religious side, because of the fact that that is his line of work. He's a professor, and I guess he's a professor in what is the name of the profession, the science of flowers? I guess I could say botanical sciences or botanical biology. I guess he's some kind of a biologist. Of course, he's going to think that we are all um, not necessarily descendants from monkeys, but we are actually more or less descendants from DNA mutations. And you know what? Maybe he's not wrong. But it is. But the thing is he also thinks that we human mutations are not going to last long on this earth due to the rapid climate changes, due to the fact that our survival rate is at a fragile high. So what does this guy have in mind? Through the use of chemicals, through the use of biological substances, we could have the abilities to be our own creators, our own creations. He has in his mind that we could create a new species, one that will adjust towards these soon to be rapid climate changes, one that will adapt to whether the climate changes become warmer, whether it becomes colder. Because let's face it, in his world, humans, well, we're hanging on by a thread. So, what does he have in mind? He wants to create human plant hybrids because it'll benefit towards, when climate changes starts to take shape. And also, he thinks that'll benefit from, the idea that if we become plants, we'll probably see a less likely chance of ever seeing food shortage. And that we need some species to take over once the human race is gone. But do you want to know something, Professor Noulter? We've been actually making our own creations. No, not necessarily plant-human hybrids, but we've been doing something that's trying to take over us. Our own creativity, our own intelligence. And that is the building of machines. Yes, machines are taking over our jobs, our livelihood, and is making our time on Earth all the more obsolete. So, while your idea seems hyperbolic, we've been creating our own lives by making machines. They're practically doing everything for us. They're being more subservient to us. While we come at a price, they almost practically do it gratis. They could probably even perform things that humans have been studying and practicing for years. Well, they could actually just go out and do things organically. To all these patients who have heart problems, there's actually robots out there that's doing things like open heart surgery, and yet they probably never even read a freaking medical book. Think about that. I mean, they have intelligence that might even surpass the human race. I mean, compared to a robot who can perform open heart surgery, compared to an actual open heart surgeon, it actually probably makes us human beings the real retards. While the robots, they never even read a medical book and they could perform successful open heart surgery. Interesting, isn't it? Think about that. But anyways, back to the film. Yes, the pacing is bad. The acting, well, I kind of knew that this movie was not going to be, anything Oscar caliber. But the acting is just so. I mean, I was expecting bad acting, yes. I was expecting bad acting, but I didn't expect the acting to be mundane. I mean, for a film that should not take itself seriously, I would have expected a little more humor instead of subtlety, since a lot of the ideas and a lot of the inspiration for this movie is kind of campy and a little over the top. But then you also look at the acting, and it's like there's really not much to write home about. There's no memorable quotes, and there's no memorable characters. In fact, this movie, after once you watch it, you can easily forget about what's happened. But me, that's not easy for me to do. I mean, everything I do watch, it'll linger on for a long time to come. And the real reason for what makes this movie so bad is that part of the reason was that the cast was made up of predominantly unknown performers, with the exception of Donald Pleasence and Tom Baker, the fourth Doctor in the Doctor Who movies. And even I gotta admit, even though Pleasence and Baker, who are more well established performers, even their acting seems to take a downturn for a more amateur at best performance. It was almost like they weren't even trying. It was like they knew that this movie was stupid, and saw if this movie is stupid, why bother putting the efforts by trying to make our performances outweigh the others, because this movie is stupid. And I think they knew that this movie was stupid, so they decided not to even put any effort at all to make their characters memorable or even something to get invested in. The main protagonists were made up of a group of university students who seemed to hang out at their dorms every weekend to party, but it's not with beer and pretzels, but with tea and cookies, like the typical Did I say cookies? Oh, I'm sorry. This movie was made in Britain, so cookies is not the right word. Biscuits. Sorry. Like the typical British young adults, all the while trying to stay hip, which at times feels forced and a bit stereotypical. So, what's functioning these young, strapping, brilliant minds in this movie besides dishing out awkward jokes, mostly by the hack scriptwriters who deliver the lines to these untalented performers? No, 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 they're just pawns in a series of weird experiments conducted by a mad scientist named Dr. Noelter, played by Donald Pleasence. Like I mentioned before, he was most famous for playing Michael Myers' rival, Dr. Loomis. Pleasance delivers the standard pseudoscience like the familiar mad scientist you see in horror films that's been done 100 times over. And do you think he offered anything new? Not a chance. He didn't offer anything new. He was no different than Dr. Frankenstein, a guy who thought that, we can cheat the system of life. You're born, you live, you die, and that people don't have to die. They could just be remade. Well, Dr. Noelter is no different than Dr. Frankenstein. I mean, he's once again one of these scientists who wants to play God by creating new species, one that will adapt better to climate change and to prevent food shortages from ever happening again. Pleasance obviously looks bored in this role, and he even once openly admitted that he was only doing this for the money. Hey, give this guy credit for honesty. That's what I go for. I go for honesty. Yes, as I knew, he knew that this movie was stupid and was only just doing it just so that just so that he could come home with a nice handsome paycheck for his wife and 5 daughters. The motives of this mad doctor is that he wants to create a new species of plant-human hybrids so that these new species can adapt to climate changes in the future and to ensure that restoring vegetable life can ensure that the world will no longer grow hungry. But of course, nobody's gonna volunteer to be a part of his experiments, not even for not even for a big lump sum of cash. No, obviously nobody's gonna raise their hands. Hey, do you want to become a human plant hybrid? Give me a big raise of hands. Here, I'll even raise my hand. I'm not raising my hand. I'm not volunteering. Oh, but you'll make a lot of but I'll give you a lot of money. I'm still not raising my hand. I think I'll just stick to being poor, but at least I'll live a little bit longer. Anyhow, so what does he do? Well, here's the thing. Here's how he does it. You see, he is not alone in this experimentations. He often is join. He often is assisted by some Igor type man named Lynch, played by Tom Baker. I mean, I mean, you should see what he looks like. He's this tall guy. He wears kind of almost like some kind of a fedora hat. He wears this long black trench coat. He's a pretty tall individual. He has this really, really badly distorted face, you know. And he also lives a double life. When he's not working as Professor Noelter's assistant, he also operates a traveling carnival freak show along with his pint-sized assistant, Mr. Burns. No, I'm not talking about The Simpsons, Mr. Burns. Excellent. No, I'm talking about another Mr. Burns. Burns is a common last name anyway. And played by Michael Dunn in one of his last roles before he died. And Lynch is, an eternally angry individual because of his physical presence, but also at the same time, he's also very, very aggressive, and he's also very abusive towards the freaks. When people also realize that he's a freak himself, he was part of this freak show as well. The world's ugliest individual. Obviously, he thinks that he's not one of them, but he is. And Professor Noelter has has kind of blackmailed Lynch into getting these um, involuntary subjects for his weird experiments in exchange to have his disfigured face normal. But we all realize that it's just a bunch of empty promises. And so, who are these guinea pigs that Professor Noelter wants to experiment on? Well, as I said before, university students who he lectures in his class. See, he wants to make sure that they're walking alone, or that they're alone at the moment. Like, for example, we have a foursome consists of one guy named Tony, played by Scott Antony, along with his friends Hetty, played by Julie Edgy. Then we had, I forget who Jill Haworth's character's name was. I think her name was Jan, I think. I'm not sure. And then you had Bridget, played by Olga Antony. Well, one day Bridget was walking home by herself, but she was being stalked by a group of midgets. One of them was, of course, Burns, who was like plastering like a poster for the carnival freak show that's going to happen. Then he's also joined by some other small little guy. As she was walking, she suddenly feels the suspicions that she is being watched. Eventually, her suspicions became true, but all of a sudden, Lynch grabs her, knocks her out, and takes him over to Professor Noelter's lab. And his lab is also kind of a bit, freaky and unsettling. And it's also full of plants, too. And I mean, not just, like pretty sweet smelling, pretty flowery flowery plants. No. I'm talking predatory plants. Oh yeah, he also has rabbits too. Yeah, big, cute, adorable rabbits. Cute, adorable rats. Oh no! Oh dear. I forgot to tell you. He's got me in his fly traps too. Oh, and those cute, adorable rabbits that he has as pets. They're not pets either. They're food. And I don't mean rabbit stew, and I don't mean boiled rabbit, and I don't mean Hassenpfeffer either. He feeds the rabbits to the Venus flytraps. And you can even hear them screaming in pain. And you can even hear their bones being crushed. Yeah. Oh, sure, save the plant population, but hey, guess are cute furry rabbits. Fuck them. We'll just feed them to the fly trap. So he's assisted by this Igor type man named Lynch, played by Tom Baker, who assists him on account that he will restore his disfigured face, which is nothing more than false hope. Lynch also runs a carnival which consists of a plethora of disfigured people who offensively exploit their disfigurements for the sake of our flawed entertainment. They kidnap the scholars and they get transformed into these horrifying plant like monsters who eventually become a part of the carnival freak show. Oh, yeah, if his experiments go bad, they just make him part of this freak show. I mean, you see Bridget being kidnapped. She gets stripped of her clothes, and then he starts injecting her with some antidotes in hopes that she would become one of his plant human hybrids. But obviously, his plant kind of backfired. So I guess to cover up his mistake, he sends Lynch over to his carnival show, and she becomes a part of his freak show. Oh yeah, she's also given a new name. She's no longer Bridget. She's the Lizard Woman of Tibet. Oh, and she's also a bonus attraction to the carnival. But of course, you also have to pay a few extra shillings to see her. Mind you, there's nothing really scary about these anomalies. I mean, the makeup costumes look like frugal stuff you wear on Halloween. Although I do have to admit, the makeup and the calisthenics that was used to cover up Lynch was probably took a lot of hours of work, but in the end, it still kind of looked like a Halloween mask rather than rather than rather than making us believe that that his face is like that. Sure, I felt that I rightfully trashed the scholars for their mundane and wanton performances, but the really bad performance that ruins the movie comes from the dry and drab Donald Pleasence. I mean, he was just very laboring to watch, and that it was his thankless initiative to hold interest in the narrative in which he fails to do so. I mean, he's supposed to be the star of this movie, but he is probably one of the reasons why I was turned off by this movie. Most of the time, he's pretty much stone faced, his voice is monotone, and his pseudo scientific jargon makes you believe that what he's saying makes a lot of sense, but in reality, it's all just hyperbolic nonsense. Yes, I do know these words. I mean, and the difference between Noelter and I is that I am a real intellectual while he's a pseudo intellectual. And then you believe in this whole idea that we could create our own, our own, our own new life forms. You're dreaming. Besides, we're doing that already. Like I said, we're building machines. They're taking over our lives. They're going to take over when we go. Once their AI starts to become more superior to us. I mean, hey, we went from the giant lizards to the hairy mammoths to the hairy mammals to the Stone Age cavemen to the human race. What's next? The machine empire. And I'm not just using Power Rangers terms either. I mean, yeah, it will come when they will take over and we will become either enslaved by them or just obsolete. I mean, if it's not happening already. But if you buy it in and believe everything this guy's saying, I take pity on your souls. Because most of the things he says is just bullshit. The opening scenes will really get patrons at the theater to ask for a refund as we're treated to a video presentation of watching plant life grow. And this whole thing goes on for like about 5 minutes too long. The only thing that kind of saves these things is that eerie boom 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 boom, kind of um almost like a synthesizer sound of someone's heartbeat. You know, like what you hear in like a lot of cliched horror B films. You know, like that boom 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 boom. Yeah, that's the only thing that's the difference. I mean, if it would have had, like flute fanfare or some sweet, charming little orchestral background, it wouldn't do. I mean, we could pretty much are prepared to know that this is a horror film because of those intense, unsettling heartbeat synthesizers. Boom, 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 boom. Sure, the effects are pretty stimulating, but at the same time, just watching 5 minutes of flowers growing and plant life materializing. What interest is that in that? What's so interesting about that? And it goes on for like 5 minutes too long before finally Donald Pleasence says something in his almost fake German accent. Oh, yes, of course, because he's a professor, so he has to have kind of a German accent. But enough of that. Let's emphasize more on the sideshow deforms and their performances because we're manipulated into making us feel sorry. Oops. Scheiße. Okay, I'm not going to continue with the German accent because they take a lot of abuse from Lynch. Yes, the sideshow deformists are probably maybe the closest characters you could have for feeling sorry for them. And in a way, these are the only characters who I actually take good umbrage of sympathy for because of the fact that we feel sorry that they have to live the life that not that they chose, but it was because they were born a certain way and they just weren't accepted by the societal norms. So their only comfort is with each other. But how can they actually live the life of comfort and peace when one of the members of Burns and Lynch himself, seems to be very abusive towards them? I mean, he pushes them around, he beats them around. I mean, he bullies them. I mean, sure, we feel bad for Lynch because he's born with a deformity, but also at the same time, he's a bully. He works with an evil scientist who wants to do weird experimentations on his university students. But he also likes to just abuse them and hurt them in any way possible. One day a midget was like standing in front of his dressing room door and he pushes him off the stairs. Or who can remember or like when the freaks had kind of a birthday party and then he just comes in and he destroys the party. He steps on their food and their wine. He smashes their cake with his foot. He's yelling, he's screaming at him. Drool comes out of his mouth. Just because they said, "We love you, Burns. We love you, Lynch, sorry. You're one of us. You're one of us." Of course, this like totally pisses him off. I mean, there is one scene where you have to take pity for him was when he gets into his car and he goes over to see a prostitute and he has to pay her extra money for her just to say "I love you" before he starts, having sex with her. But of course, he is paying for her services, and I guess since he'll probably never have a normal life or a relationship with a girl, I guess he has to sort of turn into prostitution to get his rocks going. I know I hate to say that. And yeah, okay, we do take sympathy and pity for them for the life that was given to them by the cruel acts of human nature. Even I have to say that their acting is more annoying than nails on a chalkboard. I mean, that elderly midget with the falsetto voice staring motionless at the camera is just as exciting to watch than paint dry. And it's just so depressing that these carnival freaks have to represent themselves like they're circus acts. No different than watching an elephant stand on one leg, or a horse galloping through a hoop of fire, or a dog doing backflips while his clown master is juggling oranges. I mean, sure, you have some guy who, oh wow, his name is Popeye. Why is he called Popeye? Not because he's the sailor man. Whoa! No. I mean, he's called Popeye because his eyes literally pop out of his socket. And then there's also a guy who calls himself the human pincushion because he could stick needles from one end of his chest and it'll come out the other. And he doesn't feel any pain. And then there's a guy who has some kind of walking in some kind of a eccentric upright position because he doesn't have any knees, so he kind of walks most of the time upside down. Oh, and yeah, also we have a woman who's got excess facial hairs. Oh, and by the way, there's nothing better in the world than good old mid 70s transphobia. Yes, I know I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but yes, back in the 70s, transgenderism or gender dysphoria was taboo. Oh yeah, and they were also labeled and listed as freaks because they got the bearded woman. They have the crocodile lady because of the fact that she was born with some skin deformity that caused her to have lizardy like scales on her body. But what about the fact that maybe these people are very highly intelligent? Oh, no, no, no. People are not going to admire them for their inner strength. No, they're going to admire them for the way they look. They're going to be stared and snickered at and ostracized by us normies, which is sad and it's heartbreaking. And yes, it also makes me very angry too. I know I'm spewing off sarcastic imagery drives, but it's only just to conceal my inner anger inside. Oh, it's so depressing that they actually added an anorexic woman to pass as a freak attraction. Oh, yes, because anorexic people are freaks. No, they're not. They're very sad, depressed individuals who feel the pressures of of feeling insecure of themselves because if they eat something, they're afraid they're going to gain a pound, and then they're going to think that they're overweight. No, they don't need to be exploited. They need to be treated. They need help, not exploitation. So, someone with eating disorders to be exploited like that, well, these people should be ashamed of themselves. And even watching this movie and seeing this 10-minute freak show, I was just disgusted out of my I was just disgusted out of my mind to see something like that. They should be helped, not marveled at. They should be real. They should. And all of them. They should come to the realization that that they're one of us, regardless of who they are. Nobody should ever be. No one should ever be ostracized or belittled or chastised for how they look. Are they the perfect creations? No. But then again, us normies aren't either. But I digress. The Mutations is overall more unmemorable than heartbreaking. The movie will not do very much to harm or make you mad, but for the most of it, it will likely put you to sleep in a flash. As for the cheesy plant-human hybrid costumes, it's a break from having to listen to any more mundane conversations that the scholars talk about. I guess the saying is true here. When you watch trash, you're gonna get trash. And I tell you, this movie is trash. And with trash like this, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, and maybe I'm being nice here, I would have to give the Mutations a 4 out of 10. Oh, you guys could see it for yourself, and maybe you might have a different opinion than me, but I think that this is not even a B movie. To me, it's more like an F movie because it gets a big fat F. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.